So what I'm going to talk about today is my book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Now, this book applies whether you're in a church or a school or a corporation or a department within that corporation, any kind of a setting where you're working as a team. Okay? And I've been very blessed that companies and sports teams and churches and hospitals have all been using this. So we're going to talk about teams. Okay? And my books are fiction. Most of my books are. But today I'm not going to tell you fiction stories that you'll find in my book. I'm going to tell you real stories. And so we're just going to go through this. I don't have a ton of time, and I have a lot of good material to cover, so we're going to try to go fast. I think it's good. I hope it's good. Okay, so let's talk about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. The first dysfunction of a team is the absence of trust. So I just told you that this stuff is simple. You're hearing this. If you're hearing it for the first time, you're thinking, no duh. Did this guy just say, if you want to build a team, you have to trust each other? Yeah, it's so obvious, isn't it? And I realize that, and it is. But there's something about trust. Most people think about trust in a different way than I'm talking about it. See, most people think of trust as predictive trust, which means you and I have known each other long enough now to where if I say something, you'll be able to predict my behavior. Or if we're in a meeting or in a team and you do something, I know what I can expect from you because we can predict one another's behavior. That's predictive trust. And any group of people that's known each other for a long period of time can have predictive trust, but that's not the kind of trust that makes a team great. The kind of trust that makes a team great is what I call vulnerability-based trust. Vulnerability-based trust. That's the kind of trust that comes about when human beings on a team can and will genuinely say things to one another like, I don't know the answer, I need help, I think I really messed this up, you are much smarter than I am, can you teach me how to be like you, or I'm sorry, what I said yesterday was totally out of line, and I apologize. When human beings can be that emotionally buck naked, if you will, with each other, not pretending to be something they're not, when they can be that vulnerable, it changes the dynamics on a team completely. It is one of the most powerful things you can do on a team because people come and they're open and they're honest and it changes everything. And one of the best ways we can understand this is to think about times we've been on teams that didn't have that. Let me tell you a story about one of those teams. I once worked with a startup company in the San Francisco Bay Area where I live. And it was a startup technology company, but it wasn't your typical garage startup. It was a startup on steroids, if you will. I mean, they had a ton of money in the bank right out of the gate. They had a great product. They had handpicked all these world-class executives from around the country, from SAP and Oracle and PeopleSoft, all these great companies. And they had everything going for them. And everyone said that this company was going to change the world, IPO, make a ton of money. And everybody had high expectations for them. Well, after they had been in business for a while, they called my little firm to do some work with their executive team. And God bless you. And so, oh, look, a bird, you know. And so we went to work to observe, before we started and did a 2-day offsite with this team, we went and observed one of their staff meetings just to kind of get a read on the team. And we learned 2 very interesting things about this team. First of all, they weren't doing very well in the market compared to some of their competitors. And it was very puzzling because they had so much promise. The second thing we noticed was that there was this one member of the team, it happened to be a woman, it doesn't matter, she was in charge of marketing. And whenever she spoke during the meeting, something strange would happen. She'd express her opinion, and everyone else would go silent. And there'd be this uncomfortable pause until they changed the subject and started again. So they would say, what should we do about this competitor? And she'd say, well, this is what we used to do at my old company, so this is what I think, and they'd be like, quiet. Total momentum killer until they change the subject. Why do you do that? What's going on there? And they said, because every time we disagree with her or have a different opinion, she never acknowledges that we might be right. She always insists that she's correct and defends herself. And we finally just decided, why bother? Why bother? So we thought that was interesting. A couple weeks later, we went and did a 2-day off-site meeting with that executive team. So we went off-site, and during the first day of that meeting, we talked about trust and vulnerability, but we also talked about strategy and tactics in the company and what they were doing in their business. And then that night, we went to dinner at an Italian restaurant where we had some wine with dinner, which of course is the great elixir of truth for most executive teams. Many of you found that out last night, probably. And so, after dinner, this woman had a few too many glasses of wine, and she stood up, and I couldn't write this, I promise. She stood up, raised her glass and said, she had a few too many glasses, said, Okay, we've been talking about trust today, and I just wanted to let you know I've been married for 10 years to my husband now, and I barely learned to trust him this year. And so I'm probably not going to be trusting you guys anytime soon, if ever. Cheers. And we were like, cheers, all right. So the CEO she and I went outside and talked about this, and we said, okay, here's the problem that this woman has. She has a fundamental trust issue. And it probably dates back to her childhood. I mean, seemed pretty serious. And as much as we wanted to go get, a local priest or minister and Dr. Phil, I don't know if you know who Dr. Phil is, and this woman's mama in for counseling, we realized we couldn't afford to do that. We had to make this team work, but we also didn't want to just fire her. We said, we got to work with her and get her to open up to the team. So after a number of months, I worked with her and the CEO worked with her, and it became very clear she was not going to change. Her trust issues were that deep. She couldn't be vulnerable. So the CEO finally managed her off the team and out of the company. And do you know the very next meeting that we had without her there, the dynamics had changed so much that you would have thought they had swapped out every member of that executive team for a new one. Because if just one member of a team, and that's the moral of this story, if just one member of a team cannot be vulnerable, it's going to spread like a disease to the entire team. One member. Now, everybody's going to come at that differently. Oh, you're right? Oh, sorry. Sorry. Okay. If one member of a team cannot be vulnerable, it's going to spread like a disease to the entire team. So how do we get our teammates to be vulnerable? And some people are going to come at it in different ways, different personalities, different histories, but we got to know that everybody's willing to be vulnerable and acknowledge their weaknesses. So how do we do that? Well, the only way to do it is if the leader goes first. If the leader is the first one to be vulnerable. Because see, if the leader can't be vulnerable, then nobody else is. Nobody else will be. So let me tell you a story about that. And for those that were here yesterday, this is the story I told you. I wasn't planning on telling it yesterday, but I have to retell it. So I once worked with a CEO who's a famous guy. You've seen his picture on many national, international magazines. He's very famous. I worked with him when he was at a previous company, and to be quite frank, he was not a great leader. But he was brilliant and intimidating and famous. And so nobody on his team in this company ever disagreed with him. And the head of human resources, God bless her, went to this guy and said, listen, nobody ever tells you when they disagree. You're not benefiting from the opinions of the people on the team. You have to do something. And they agreed to do 360 feedback, to get feedback from the team, which is sometimes a good idea, sometimes not. Well, they asked my little firm to administer this 360 feedback tool to get feedback from his team. So we did, and we collected all the information from his team members. And then we gave him the results, and he proceeded to share those results with no one. And so finally, the head of HR go over the results with your team. They're curious as to what they learned from what you learned. And he said, okay, I'll do it at the next staff meeting. And then he reluctantly, begrudgingly allowed me as an outsider who administered the tool to observe this meeting. And so I sat off to the side on a little chair that had wheels on the bottom of it, which will become relevant here in just a second. And he stood up and he said, okay, it says here I'm not a very good listener. Huh. What do you guys think? And they went around that table and said, well, I think you're a good listener. I do too. I think you're good. I don't think you're a bad listener. I don't have a problem with that. I think you're a fine listener. So do I. And I remember, because I'd only written one book at this point in my career, and I thought, I could never put this in my books. Nobody would believe this, right? So he said, okay, good. The next one here says I don't give enough feedback or praise. Huh. I thought I'd gotten better at this. What do you guys think? Yeah, I think you're great at it. I think you've gotten much better. I don't think there's a problem with it. All the way around the table. And this is where, and I laugh about it now, but I remember this well, I was sitting there on my chair thinking, if I have any integrity as a consultant, this is where I have to lose a client or put one in jeopardy, right? So I got on my little chair and I was like, eek, eek, eek. And I remember this well, I'll never forget it. I rolled up right next to this famous CEO and I said, excuse me, but you guys are the only people who filled this survey out, so somebody had to write this. Very quiet in the room. So the head of marketing, poor guy, slowly raised his hand, said, yeah, I think you could give more. I'd like to get more. I mean, my team would like to get more feedback and praise from you. And, you know, they only hear from you if they screw up, and I think it'd be nice if you told them if they did something well. So, yeah, I think that I wrote that on my form. I can vouch for that. I think you could improve in that area. Silence. Till the head lawyer goes, not me, I think you get plenty of praise. Everybody else said, so do I don't understand what he's talking about. And they killed the guy. I'm melting. Now, the moral of that story is this. That's the day, first of all, that CEO lost all credibility. Secondly, it's when that's how he sent a message to the team, I'm never going to be vulnerable, you guys shouldn't be either. You know, eventually that company spun out of control and went out of business or sold off for a fraction of its worth. You know what the Wall Street Journal said? They had strategic problems. They had some errors in their product. But those were downstream symptoms of the real problem. The real problem was that there was no trust on that team. And it started with the leader who couldn't be vulnerable. Now, he didn't have to do anything weird. All he had to do was stand up there and say, hey, you guys, I know I've got some issues. I've heard about this in performance reviews throughout my career. And, well, my wife tells me this once a week or so. And I know that I'm not great at it. I'll give it a shot. I'll try to get better. I don't know that I'll ever be great, but I'm going to try, and I appreciate your feedback. That's all he had to do. But he stood there instead like the emperor with no clothes, with his big old bottom hanging out. Like, how do I look, guys? And they're like, you look fine, boss. And everybody said, don't admit you've got problems. Now, some people will say, but Pat, what about that old saying, don't let them see you sweat? You know how leaders, we're not supposed to let people see us sweat. You know, the truth is, the people that work for us, they know when we're sweating before we do. You can't really hide it. And that's why the best leaders are the ones that go, check this out. You know when you work for somebody who's honest about their faults? You think, you know, you're human and you know your humanity and you know the issues you have. Those are the leaders we'll walk through walls of fire for. But see, you can't trust someone if they don't know who they are and they're not comfortable with who they are. Because then you have to protect them from their ego. Which is why vulnerability is such a powerful thing. But it's so funny, we as leaders don't like to humble ourselves to share in our humanity, which is all we have. We are called as leaders to be vulnerable. And when we do, other people will trust us. Okay? Now, some people will say, but you don't want to be too vulnerable, do you? You know, the truth is, I don't think you can be too vulnerable. I suppose if you come to work every day and you say, hey, I made a mistake, made another mistake, don't know what I'm doing there, oops, screwed that one up too. I think that's probably a competence issue, not a vulnerability problem. The truth is, whatever our issues are, we got to be out there with our team, because that's the only way they're going to trust us and the only way we're going to inspire them to do the same with one another.